Hi everyone, it's Chris Petri. Welcome. We're going to do this beautiful winery and vineyard. We're going to cover all the steps, the basic methods you'll need, the techniques. We'll cover the colors in depth so you have everything you need to really get this done. It really is a fun painting. Architecture is pretty straightforward, nothing too difficult. And we just have, a lot of fun getting in the colors. And also we're going to cover really in detail the alla prima method. So this painting is done in alla prima. You see all the darks in this painting. That's what we painted first. So you're gonna key in on all the darks in this painting first, and then you're gonna build up to your medium tones, and then your lightest light tones lastly. So as you do this painting, you're gonna do it in a real step-by-step fashion, going in first with your darks, and then building the rest of the colors out from there, and tonal values and the composition. So let's get right into it. All right, we're getting started here. Let's I'll have my phone. I hope that's a little bit visible. And again, I'm using a new setup here until I get my studio back into shape. So I hope you don't mind if we just do a little bit of a different look here. I'm going to do a quick rectangle around my paper here just to remind me. I have to make sure I fill up this space with lots of information. I'll give myself a border here, and we're going to just get started on the vineyard and the we have the winery here. Let's see. This is a little bit, I would say, I'm going to try to make the sky a little bit larger in this picture. So I'll try to make the mountains about a little bit below. This is one of those paintings. I think we can go about halfway with the mountains, maybe even up a little higher. So I'm just going to create the mountains here in the distance. And then I see a secondary bit of hills over here, so I'm going to trace this along this way here. And then I can see the winery is in the center of the picture pretty much, so we'll do that. We'll keep that in the center. So I'm going to draw the main entry for the winery here. And we'll put in a roof here. I can see this is a clay tile roof. This is in California. And there's a chimney on this side over here. So I'll just do that as a rectangle. And then we have 3 windows here underneath, and they're in shadow, and I'll create the shadow right across here and then across here, and then we have the arched doorway here. I think this is actually a balcony. This is a balcony here on the second floor, it looks like. And then underneath that balcony is probably the main entrance to the building, the main doors. And these are all darks here. You can kind of see The darkest darks in the picture are this archway here, the doorway underneath, like that. And then lots of strong shadows on this building. So what I'm going to do is, this is more in light over here. Let's do, this is the other part of the roof over here. And there's another shadow. And there's another roof here. That goes to about there, and then it goes on a pretty decent angle like that. That might be up here a little bit like that. And I'll use a little bit of a kneaded eraser occasionally. So I'm going to keep working on the building here. I can see that this lower roof over here, that's underneath this roof, the main roof, just below that is the, and if you need to use a ruler here, you can use a ruler. I think I'm just going to do this freehand, but you can use a ruler if you like. And then there's some trees over here. And then the building comes down a little further. Like so. And there's lots of grapevines all through the front of this scene. So we're going to just capture those. We're going to do them, you know, we're not going to paint every leaf and vine and plant and grape. We're just going to get the basic idea of things as we go. So over here, I'm going to take this same line here, which is the top of the roof over here of the building. And I'm just going to transfer it over and continue it. That's the same line going across. And I'm probably going to go about the same distance. So I'm just going to measure this and say, right here is the same distance as this. And it winds up being just about the same spot as we ended up over here. And there's some bushes over here. There's a window over here. And then there's a roof over here, like so. And a wall that comes down here, and it looks like there's an awning over here. And over here there's some windows. And I'll just make indications of the windows, some squares. These are all darks. The windows are very, very dark in tonal value, so I'll shade them in. And then over here, there's another 2 windows, like so. And I'll do another one over here next to that one. And then there's some trees and things over here that are actually in the foreground this way. So these are a little bit in front. And then we have another tree over here. So I'm just trying to get the main bit of trees and the foliage that are Over here, there's another door over here, it looks like, with some, this roof comes over here, and then this looks to be another and if you think something looks a little bit like you need to fix something up a little bit, maybe make a better angle, don't worry about it. Do it now while you're drawing. While you're doing your drawing, don't forget, get your pencil drawing as best as you can get it, and don't worry about taking a little more time to fix things up a little bit if you have to, if you think you need to. You know, while you're drawing, that's the time to make your changes, and because once you start painting, you probably don't want to start going back in and doing erasing and redrawing things, although you can do that. That's sometimes you might have to, but for the most part, we always try to get our pencil drawing good the first go. And I think that looks pretty good. There's some more bushes and things over here I can see, and some trees. And there's a, it looks like maybe a canopy over there too as well. All right, so I think we have a pretty good start here. We're gonna maybe start to get our paints ready. The only thing I would do now is maybe I'll do some of these posts that are in the ground for the vines, and they sort of angle in. They get smaller in size as they go towards the structure over here. And all right, I think that looks pretty good. One more thing here. I just want to get this darker area of trees in the background here, and they kind of go over here like so. And then there's some more trees over here. And there's some posts that trail off into the distance there. And then there's a few more over here. And again, I'll make these smaller though. I don't want to make these, I guess the main thing with this drawing these posts are they're taller and larger over here in the foreground, and then as they go back into the picture they get smaller and smaller. And I noticed they are in a line, so I don't want to go too much. They tend to be in rows like the vines. And okay, this is perfect. Let's take a break. I think I'm gonna just do just keep looking back at the paint photograph to get my shadow patterns here. Maybe I'll do the shadow patterns over here. And maybe my building didn't come out exactly like this one, but I'm just trying to see if I can find some shadowing. Shadow patterns. There's some darks in here where the doors and windows are. Just want to get those, and I think the rest we can paint in. That'll be fine. All right, so we'll take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll start painting. We have our pencil drawing pretty much all set. Looks good. I'll just grab my palette and my brushes and we'll get started. All right, so let's start painting. I'll use my my travel palette, and basically my colors. I always keep my palette the same, as we talked about in the beginning of the video. I keep all my colors the same in the same locations all the time, and I can just go quickly across my colors. This is alizarin crimson, raw umber, burnt sienna, burnt umber, cadmium red, this is yellow ochre, cobalt blue, French ultramarine blue, cadmium orange, raw sienna, this is sap green, cerulean blue, cadmium lemon yellow, or cadmium yellow lemon. That's actually cadmium yellow. The next to the right is the cadmium yellow lemon. And then we have our viridian. Looks almost like a turquoise color. And we have purple, which is my ultramarine violet, Winsor Newton. So these are all Winsor Newton and Holbein paints. So we can get started. We're going to paint alla prima, and all with alla prima, the reason I like it so much is I can go in and just start doing the painting and getting in the darks and getting that all started, and then working from the darks going to the lighter colors, tonal values in the painting. If you paint in the glazing technique, which I often do as well, and if you've been with me quite a long time, you'll know we do both the alla prima method and the glazing technique. And the glazing technique would just be doing light washes of color, like the color of the sky first, and cover the whole paper, let it dry, and then come back and go over and do your darker colors on top of that first wash. This is the alla prima method, which is a little different. You're kind of working in reverse. You're going in and we're starting with our darker darks, like the windows, some of the darker bushes and trees, and then we work towards our lighter colors and tonal values secondarily. So that's just the basic synopsis of it quickly, the alla prima versus the glazing technique. And you'll see artists use both interchangeably sometimes. I use both techniques interchangeably in one painting, or sometimes I just will do all of my painting alla prima, or sometimes I'll do my whole painting in just the glazing technique for the most part. So it's kind of up to you. You can kind of use both of those techniques. I always say try to learn them both really well, and then when you're painting any given painting, you'll sort of, when you're looking at your painting and starting it, you'll kind of get the feel for, even before you start your painting, you might know in your mind intuitively what you're going to want to do the painting, whether you'll want to do it in alla prima or a glazing technique. I think this is a better painting done with alla prima. So I'll just do that. I'll start going in and mixing up some darks, some French ultramarine blue and burnt umber, maybe some burnt sienna too, some French ultramarine blue, and maybe some cerulean blue. So I'm going to get some good darks there. I tend to like to spritz my palette just to get some moisture in there. And I'll start getting in my darks here. So I'll start over here, and I'm just going to do some squares. You could use a square brush if you have a small square brush. That would probably be good. And so I'm going to start getting my darks in here. The windows. And if you find some of them aren't as dark as you might think, you can always lift up a little bit of paint. Like that. You can also get some yellow ochre and raw sienna and get some warmer color in there too, besides that darker dark. And this is quite dark in here. And I just carefully go in there and get the darks in. And then there's a balcony there, so I'm going to leave that. It's quite dark under here, like so. So again, I just want to get in my darks first here, and these are the windows and door openings in the winery. And we also have some really dark shadows, but let's try to get our windows in first. So I'm going to try to get these darks in. I noticed there might be a little bit of red in there too. Warm it up a little bit. It seems like it's kind of hot and sunny here in this painting. So I want to capture that feeling of the heat by making sure I add plenty of warm colors too in the dark shadows. So I'm adding in a little bit of cadmium yellow and a little bit of cadmium red into these darker dark areas. Once I get that dark paint on there, you can always add in a little touch of these darks, or these more warmer colors like the cadmium red, cadmium yellow, a little bit of cadmium orange. And that is looking pretty good. We have more darks here. Some of these look like I can see some cerulean blue in some of these darks here. Like that. And then don't be afraid to get those darks in. And I'm already noticing that. I'll mix up a little bit of my green with a little bit of burnt sienna. And I'm just going to get some of these trees going that are here and there. They're quite dark. I see greens in there and some burnt umber, some darker darks. But I definitely can say I do see a lot. Can you see all these darks? Like if you squint your eyes a little bit, sometimes you can kind of see the darks a little better. So that's why I'm trying to and then sometimes too I will change the painting around a little bit. I see a white palette of something over here. It looks like a palette of maybe some sort of products for the winery, possibly supplies. I'll just make some trees over there. I think it'll look better if I just kind of blend it all in and make it trees over here and bushes. And a good idea, I think what I'll do is I'm going to start mixing up some of these golden colors here. And I am going to paint in these shadows. I'm going to try to do a little splashing. And I noticed these are pretty warm shadows over here, but they are pretty dark, so I'm going to mix up that blue and the red. So burnt sienna and blue and burnt umber. And then there's another shadow that goes across here. We could fix some problems later if we want with a little bit of white paint. So if you go over something, don't worry about it. If you paint over something, like if you paint over an area that's supposed to be lighter with a darker paint, you can repair that later, fix it up later with some white paint or some white mixed with some yellow, whatever the colors are. You can mix up a little bit of a wash that'll repair a certain area, so I wouldn't really get worried about having issues with so now I'm going to mix that golden color for the and I'm just going to go right across here. Like that. And I'm going to go right across here, like so. Okay, and I'm just going to keep working that gold color right across the buildings over here. We can add a little bit of more details to the building after we get this wash on here. So I think I'm going to finish up this building with the gold washes, and then we'll come back and we'll start doing the roof maybe. But I think now's the point where we can get some of this large golden color, and I knew that might happen. So that did not go as bad as I thought it was going to. I thought that was really going to go all the way down to the ground and land and not. I saved that one. So I'm just going to do the same thing here, right? Paint right down with that gold color of the building. And I'm going to do the roofs a little more orange. And maybe some orange and some blue even for the clay tiles. So red and orange, I think, for the clay tile roof. But you can kind of see we and again, if you go over a spot and you think it's too dark, you can always lighten up a little bit. Blot up a little bit. We can go back later and fix it up. And if you want to charge in some darker darks, like over here, for some trees, and that's a shadow anyway, over here. Like that. That's a shadow. All right, I think we're doing well. I think we have a good amount of paint, darks going to get ourselves started with the alla prima. I'll put in a few more bushes and trees right here. Like that. And we'll tie these down in here too. We'll start to tie some of this down into the, like that. All right, I think this is looking pretty good. All right, let's take a break now. I think my concentration is going to be better if I take a 15 or 10, 5 or 10 minute break, and then I can come back and continue painting. But I think we did a good job of kind of going right across the main focal point of the painting, which is the winery and the vineyards in the front here. But the main building is the beautiful part of this to me. Everything looks gorgeous, but I like that building a lot. It looks really great, the winery. So we have all that set now. For the most part, we just have to do the roof areas and maybe a little more on the building. Maybe we can just take some gold and get that into while we're working on that building. Okay, let's take a quick break and we'll come right back and continue working. All right, let's get back into it here. So we're moving right along. We got a lot of good darks in here. Again, we're doing the alla prima method, getting in our darks first, and then we also start doing our middle tonal values with the golden color of the building. I think next I'm going to work on the roofs here a little bit, and I'm going to make that like I see a little bit of burnt sienna in the roofs and a little bit of cerulean blue, so I'll grab some burnt sienna and some cerulean blue. Kind of make it a warm and cool. I can almost even, I think the best thing to do is to actually kind of just give these indications of the clay tiles, like so. I think that looks pretty good. I can also go back in later and do some more darks. And this up here too, I'm going to try to do the same thing. I'm going to try to get those clay tile, the rows of clay tiles I think that looks pretty good. And I'll try to get a little bit of that cerulean blue in there too. So a little bit of warm and cool. I think I can go in and do a couple of horizontal lines once that dries. I see a little bit of a shadow over here. also see that I should get this painted in too. I forgot to paint the cornice of the building on top of the roof area up here. I'll add in some shadowing. I'll use some burnt sienna. So I'll use some burnt sienna, cadmium red, cadmium orange, and I'll try to get some of that warm shadow color under here. And the same over here. I just painted this in, so that looks all right. And then I'll mix up a little more dark here with some blue to get some of these darker shadows under there and under here. And then I also need to add that shadow across here. And that's going to be some cerulean blue as well under here, like so. And then some more shadows, some warm shadows, red, cadmium red, and some burnt sienna up here like this. I see some warm shadows under here. And then we can go in and get a little bit of burnt umber, French ultramarine blue, to add in a couple of darker shadow lines. Like that. And then sometimes if we paint over our darks with a lighter wash to do a shadow, sometimes those become a little bit lighter again. They become a little diluted, or or they become not as, they lose a little bit of their strength with their color of the darks. So you can always go back in and add some darks over the top of your original darks that you did create when you were painting. That happens often. But I think this is looking pretty good all through here. And I will start to work in the sap green distant mountains over here. And I'm just going to try to put some burnt sienna in there too. So I'll take some burnt sienna and put that into the green. And I think I will lighten that up a little bit, because what's happening is it looks like it's so I'll take some sap green and French ultramarine blue, and I'll darken this up over here. So this way the mountains I'm making in the back over here, I want them to look further back. So if they're lighter, they're going to look better back here. And so then I'll go back in and get a little bit of blue and mix some blue into that green and brown. And this way I can do a good job of making this look like it's in the distance a little bit by adding that blue, cooler, bluish color. And this trails down a little bit over here. And then I'll just give that a little bit of a and then I'll try to smooth out that line a little bit like that. Okay, and then there's a little bit of that same, I'll do the same thing again, a little bit of cerulean blue, keep these a little cooler back here, these mountains and hills. And I think I'll do this lighter green. I added a little bit of Viridian here with some cerulean blue. I'm going to try to, I think I'll do a little more Viridian again, and I'll just go right across here like so. Then maybe I'll go in and get a little, mix up the colors a little bit, add a little bit of that cadmium yellow. A little bit of cadmium yellow there. So I'm going to try to spruce up the color of this. So I'll use cadmium, a little bit of cadmium orange and cadmium yellow. You can blot up a few spots. Okay. I'm going to go with a larger brush now, and I think I'm going to also change the water. So let me take another quick break. We're going to work on the sky next while this dries over here, and then we'll do the mountains after we do the sky. So let me get some fresh clean water. My water bucket has a lot of muddy looking water in there. I want to change it out, and we'll come right back in just a second. All right, now we're just going to go in and get a little bit of some sky wash going. I'm not going to get too fancy with the sky at all. I tend to feel what works best for me is when I do my skies, I try to just keep them simple and let the water and the paint do the work for the most part. I don't try to, I guess, get too detailed with the skies. It's just I always felt it was easier to paint skies with less detail. And what I'll do is I'll just pre-wet the area just above the mountain tops with a damp brush. This way just keeps the water from flowing down into the mountains. It's okay if it does infiltrate that area. Then I'll just take some fresh clean water and I'll pre-wet the paper with fresh clean water in spots here and there, but not everywhere. and I'll just get that little bit of water. We see a really beautiful, it looks like a cobalt blue sky, so I'm going to stick to that. So as I work with my palette, I tend to I'll maybe clean out a section. Maybe I'll start over here and just get that section on my palette fresh and clean, and then get some of that cobalt blue on there, and maybe I'll add a touch of some burnt sienna, maybe just a little bit of that in there, a little bit of some other colors here that we've been using in the painting. But again, I like to just keep it simple. Get some paint on there and see what happens. Okay, some paint on there, looks good. Then I can maybe put in a really couple of real nice spots of cobalt there and there, maybe a few like that. And then maybe I'll just have some clouds. And I always know when I'm working like this that I can get my tissue and blot in a couple of places too if I want. So I don't feel like I'm ever kind of like locked into having a certain design in my sky. I can now go in. I can go in now with a fresh, clean tissue and do some blotting like that. Maybe there's some clouds. And again, I go in there, maybe I get some cerulean blue too. We have a lot of cerulean blue in our painting, so it makes sense to add some into the sky. And again, I just kind of work on it a little bit at a time and kind of think to myself, does it look okay? Does it look pretty good? And I think that looks fine. You can also dry off your brush with your tissue like so. And then you can lift up that paint. Dry off the brush. Sometimes it works. Dry off the brush on the tissue. There we go. We'll let this set up a little bit and dry, and then we'll come back and do this mountain range across the top. Now we can work on the front area, the foreground. I think what I'll do is the greens of the grapevines here and grapes. Very loosely, I'll splash a lot, I think, and I won't spend a tremendous amount of time doing this. I'm going to try to get this done quickly. So I'll get some of the green here, sap green. So I'm going to get sap green, cadmium lemon yellow, a little bit of cerulean. A little bit of raw umber too, maybe. I'm just looking at the colors in there. I'll get some water on my brush, and you can kind of see that water is, so to get some good splashing, I need to make that wash pretty wet like that. And I'm just going to do some splashing. I tend to do it this way. The way just to give the feeling that everything is kind of coming towards us, the plants and things. And then once I start doing that, then I can start going in and then getting some of the darker darks. So I'll start to get the darker greens in there, a little bit of burnt sienna. And then I'll paint the posts. Once this all dries, I will paint in the posts. But I'm going to continue to work on this here. I'll put some golds in there too. So I'm going to mix in some of these oranges and I'm going to go right across. Like so. And then as you're painting, you can always think to yourself, you always have the option as an artist to change the ideas of the painting to suit yourself, to make it better for yourself, to make it easier for yourself. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to actually play down the amount of leaves and all these different grapevines and leaves and all the foliage in here. I'm going to try to make this more as if maybe it's springtime and they're just starting to plant. So we're not going to show all everything in full bloom, all the vines and the grapes and everything. We're going to simplify it. That's how I see it. I'm going to try to make it easier for myself to paint this painting. So what I'm going to do is start to get the idea in my mind. It's springtime and they're just starting to plant and put their vines, plant their grapes and the grapevines. I'm not going to worry about it. It's my painting. I can change it around. Always think of it that way. It's your painting. You can change things around. You don't have to feel like you have to paint everything you see exactly the way it is. If that helps, I hope that makes sense. You can change things in your painting to suit yourself, to make it easier for yourself. As an artist, you have to sometimes do that. You can't. Maybe sometimes you'll find out as you're painting that something's going to be really hard to accomplish in your painting. So sometimes we're better off just doing a little things differently. So I'm going to let this dry and come back in here and we'll start doing this mountain range back here. And I'll use cerulean blue, raw umber, burnt umber. I see a lot of green in there. Let's see how this looks. It tends to be a little dark. It's kind of counterintuitive to paint mountains in the distance darker, but they are a little darker. So I'm carefully painting around the roof here. And a little bit of cerulean blue. And then more sap green, burnt sienna, a little bit of blue. All right, I think that's looking pretty good. Then I might take a little more sap green, burnt sienna. Okay, now this is still a little damp here. I'm going to let this dry like fully, 100%. I might use the blow dryer now. So let's just we'll take another break. I'm going to get the blow dryer and dry this foreground really well. This way we can paint in some more of the plants, some beginnings of plants. It's springtime, we're going to pretend, and we'll get in some of these darker posts, and that's really going to look good as we start to finish up the painting. I think the sky is fine. The distant mountains look good, so I believe we're pretty much just going to have to do a few final details, and we should have it. Okay, so I'll be right back. All right, let's start getting in our posts in our vineyard fields here. I'm going to actually do burnt umber, French ultramarine blue, burnt umber, French ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and I think that's a good, maybe a little cadmium red in there too. Maybe I'll put a little cadmium red down at the bottom, but this should be plenty good and dark. And then I'll just start doing the posts, and this is a little bit of that might be a little bit dark, so I'll add some more burnt umber there. Maybe a touch of water. And as I go into the distance here, I'm gonna kind of get this in. They're gonna get thinner and thinner as they go. They're larger in the front here, and we'll see if we can get some shadows on them too. And I always try to start over here on the left and then work my way across this way. So this way I don't lean into the paint. So I just do a few here and there. There's a couple over here. That looks good. I might make a little bit of a shadow color with some cerulean blue added to that. So I'll just add some cerulean blue. And the shadows are going in this direction. So I'm just going to do a small bit of shadow for each one, just to have. Key is to try to keep them all going in the same angle for the most part. Shadows are not always easy. Sometimes they look like golf clubs a little bit. That's okay. If that happens, then I would go longer like this. So if you see a problem, try to right away think to yourself, how can I'm just thinking creatively. I like golf. I watch golf. Maybe someday I'm going to try to get out there and learn how to play. But right now I'm thinking, that's good. And what we'll do now is we'll get some more green, some yellow, so some green, sap green, cadmium yellow, some raw umber, and then let's just make some things that look like stones and rocks and the dirt here. We're just starting out. It's the springtime. We haven't planted yet for our vineyard. And then we're going to have a little bit of burnt umber and raw umber here. Just as a little bit of indications, let's take our brush and just maybe drag across. We'll make some lines. This might be some dirt in the fields here. Just like this, indications, doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just kind of scrubbing with my brush a little bit. A bit of dry brush technique, so I don't have much paint on my brush at all. But I think that's just enough of detail on the ground there. And I will put a little more of the cadmium yellow. So the cadmium yellow, that warm color, I'm going to try to get some of that yellow in there. Just a little bit of a light wash, not too much. So I'll take some more of that cadmium yellow, just a little bit on the brush, and maybe just get a couple of those lines coming across. Careful though, we want to be careful. We want to let those posts dry before we start adding some washes to our foreground like that. So those dried quite a bit while we were working, so it worked out good. Always check as you're working to make sure everything is going to work out fine as far as what things are dry, what things are still wet as far as your washes and your subject matter. But I think this is a real fun painting. We had a great time doing this. We took our time. We did it the alla prima method, so we always, right from the start, we said to ourselves, let's choose what technique and method we're going to use for this, and we decided let's do the darks first and kind of do this alla prima, and it worked out good. You could do this in the glazing technique as well, but I think we did make the right decision on the alla prima method, and you can kind of see it looks good. We feel like there's some good sunlight in the picture with our shadows, and I think we have a good sky, and the mountains look quite enjoyable with lots of different colors in there. You can see I used lots of different colors, and I always mention that. Let's use and mix a lot of different colors into our washes, and let's not get stuck with that issue of just using one or two colors and then trying to paint a whole section of the painting with just one or two colors. Let's use 3 or 4 different colors, mix them all up, and get lots of interesting colors modulating through your painting, and you'll notice that it'll look much better. It'll be more pleasing and pleasant looking to look at. And I'm going to actually do one more thing here. I noticed I need to put a bit of a shadow, so I'll put some French ultramarine and burnt umber underneath this here by this chimney, and there's also so there's a few finishing touches we could do, but I think that's pretty good. All right, let's call this a finished painting. Again, if you like this video, you want to subscribe, right on the right hand side below, you'll see the subscribe button. All that's going to do is just alert you the next time you open up YouTube. You'll see that if I've created a new video, I usually create 2 or 3 videos a week. You'll see the new videos in your YouTube channel, and then you can watch if you want. You can check them out. And I always mention too, leave comments if you have questions in the comment section below. This way I can answer your questions if you have any. And I always thank everybody. Thank you so much for all the encouraging words, and everyone's always so pleasant and kind, giving me compliments. And we have a great time on this channel, and we're going to continue to do so. So until we meet up again and paint, I wish you happy painting, everybody. See you soon.